Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the first ever Mid-Atlantic Teaching Artists Virtual Retreat. So we're really thrilled that you're here today and that you've been joining sessions throughout the last couple of weeks. So my name is Jamie Dunlap and I work at the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts. Just want to let you know that this session will be recorded and it will be shared later. So if you do not want to have your video on for the recording, please turn off your video now. Today's workshop is called Creative Aging During COVID, and it will be led by Julie Kline with Lifetime Arts. So I'm gonna turn things over to our producer for a brief review on some technical housekeeping items before we get started. So I'm gonna pass it to you, Susan.
All right, thank you, Jamie. Couple of Zoom instruction slides I wanted to share with you here. One is if you want to see the interpreter view. So if you haven't seen the interpreter on yet, it's scroll to interpreter, it's Laura, but you'll scroll to interpreter Laura. And once you find her video, you can point your cursor in the top corner there. You should see 3 dots, and then you can click pin video, and then you'll only see the interpreter. If you prefer to see all videos or webcams that are up, you can click in the top right corner where it says Gallery View to see all webcams that are turned on. If you click again, it'll take you to Active Speaker View. If you get disconnected, I suggest just use the same link that you used to join and try coming back in. Today's sessions are being recorded, as Jamie mentioned. And if you do miss some, you'll be able to check it then. You'll be able to watch the recording. You might want to jot down my cell number, which I've also sent out in the chat. If you have any issues getting back in, you can feel free to give me a call. And back to the, for a moment, to the interpreter view, what I wanted to ask is if anybody, we are going to be doing some breakouts today, so anyone that needs the interpreter in the room with them or would like the interpreter in whatever breakout room they're in, please, you can chat me privately by just switching the 2 in the chat to Susan Zoll. Okay. Now, there's a couple of things on your controls I want to point out. If you point and hover your cursor at the bottom of your screen, your controls should pop out. I know the image here is a little blurry, but I think we can read it well enough. All the way to the right is the chat. So you click on that and it will pop out. And if everyone can just type in hello or hi or whatever you want to type in, so I know that you found that, that would be great. There you go. Hello, hello, hello. It's very nice that everyone's saying hello. Not that I asked. Then to the left, you'll see participants. If you want to click on participants and pop that out as well, I'm going to show you something on the next slide. Here you can hover over your name till you see more, and you can choose to rename yourself if you want. So if you want to change your name or add your pronouns, if you desire, you can go ahead and do that now. Also on that participant panel that you've opened up, at the bottom, there are some icons that look a little different like this, but they have the same functionality. So there's a blue hand, for example. So if everyone can raise their blue, okay, Paul, I see you got your hand up. And Ethel, great. Everybody's hands are going up. Thank you. You guys got it. So at some points, you can feel free to raise your hand. And I'm going to pass it back to Jamie.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan. I'm just going to introduce you all a little bit to our presenter today, Julie Kline. As I mentioned, she is with Lifetime Arts. She is an education associate there. And a little bit of background on Lifetime Arts. It was founded in 2008. It's a nonprofit art service organization whose mission is to encourage creative aging by promoting the inclusion of professional arts programs and organizations that serve older adults, prepare artists to develop the creative capacity of older adult learners, and foster lifelong learning in and through the arts by increasing opportunities for participation in community-based programming. And I bet a lot of you are familiar with this organization already. So we're really excited to hear from Julie today. At Lifetime Art, she has co-facilitating trainings across the country. She assists with the design and development of that training curriculum and supports all of the organization's education efforts. She is from New York City. She's a New York City-based director, actor, and writer with a special focus on the creation of original theater work for older adults, as well as intergenerational theater projects. Which is awesome. It sounds like a wonderful bio and resume. We cannot wait to hear more from you, Julie. If you want to find out a little more about Julie, you can go onto the NASA site under the Mid-Atlantic Teaching Artist Retreat, and full bios for all of our presenters are listed there. So I also would like to welcome and introduce to you all Annie Montgomery. She's also with Lifetime Art. She's here to support Julie today and help answer any questions. She is the Director of Education with the organization. So welcome both of you. Julie, we can't wait to hear from you, and let's begin. I'll pass it to Julie.
Thank you so much, Jamie, and thank you, Susan. Everybody hear me okay and see me all right? Let me give me a little thumbs up. Great, thank you. So thank you so much for responding to the poll. That was great. It gives me a great sense of who all is in this virtual room together. And I'm really excited to see a lot of fellow theater artists and also just a variety of artists represented. And so many people with experience working with older adults, which really makes us feel good at Lifetime Arts, because really our entire aim is that this work spreads across the country and that all teaching artists are engaging in work with older adults. So that was just thrilling to see. I'm really glad to be here and also to see all of your experience working online. So we're going to go ahead and start with our presentation. Go ahead and add any comments or questions into the chat as they come up. And at the end of the session, after we go into breakout rooms, we'll come back and have some time for some Q&A. But just as things are coming up for you, please get them in the chat, and Jamie and Susan are going to be collecting those for me. So let's go on to the next slide there. And so the goals for today's session are that we will review best practices in creative aging program design. Then we're going to be introduced to tips and adaptations for remote delivery programs. And we're going to be introduced also to current programs that are maintaining these best practices during the COVID pandemic. We're going to learn ways to address some of the tech accessibility challenges that older adults are facing with online learning. And we're going to discuss a lot of online class facilitation techniques, modifications that really are connected to these creative aging goals and best practices. So first, I just want to say, we're also learning along with you, and everything that we've gathered that we're presenting in this presentation, we're gathering from organizations and teaching artists just like you. So we're all learning together, and that's also why I want to welcome any suggestions or ideas coming into the chat. We can say, what we've discovered so far and the best practices and recommendations that we're gleaning from that. But really, this is a dialogue. As you all know, we're in the middle of this pretty, big event and transition for a lot of online programming. So this is really a conversation more than anything else. I also just want to say that in an online or alternative format, some creative aging program elements, of course, are going to need to be altered. But we want to remember that the overall, best practice goals are the same. And those are mastery, developing a mastery of an art form, and forming community through the art making experience. So just defining this further, mastery of skills is really learning an art form in depth and having the opportunity to practice that art form and become better at that art form over time. And we always recommend that the social engagement and the building community aspect between participants be connected to that art making and that learning. So also I wanted to start with some terms you probably already know, many of you, but just we want to define these terms as related to creative aging. So these are, online learning terminology that we're all talking about a lot right now, but just as a reminder, synchronous learning is the idea that it requires that students meet at a set time every week in a live class-like setting, often via video conference or teleconference. So this is, very similar to an in-person program. Students are meeting all together and learning together. Sometimes the organization might choose to run synchronous class sessions every week. Sometimes we're finding that people might choose to do classes every day, but over a shorter amount of time, like 1 or 2 weeks. But the idea is that the creative aging program is held over a series of classes of these scheduled meetings that everyone agrees to meet as a group and engage in learning together. Often during these synchronous classes, the students might hear instructions from teaching artists. They might work together, share their work that they're working on. They might discuss a resource. So the next term, of course, is asynchronous learning. So this is activities that students complete on their own time, watching a video that demonstrates an art form, going on a virtual museum tour, reading an article, reading a poem, maybe working on an assignment outside of class time. And there's lots of asynchronous art classes, as you know, that are available all over the internet. So it is possible to learn art skills only through asynchronous videos and resources and have no group meetings through synchronous scheduling. But we want to highlight that it's important to note that social engagement opportunities, which is such an important part of creative aging, are going to be harder to support in asynchronous activities. So we've been doing a lot of thinking about that. How do we make sure that that social engagement piece is still present in online programs? It's a challenge. So we're developing recommendations. We'll go into more suggestions later, but I'd love to hear, other ideas that you all have in addressing that. So like many of you, teaching artists and organizations across the country adapted their older adults arts programs when COVID hit. One example is Deborah Pascaret. She's the manager of community engagement for the Wallace Annenberg Center for Performing Arts in Beverly Hills. And she's also the teacher of Stage Stories. That's a storytelling memoir writing group for older adults. They were just at the end of their session. They were preparing for their culminating event when all their in-person classes were canceled during COVID. So in response, Deborah designed a new extended curriculum that stretched well beyond the original 8-week series. And the students continued to meet every week for 2 hours now via Zoom video conference. So they met for 2 hours, which isn't actually common from what we're seeing from organizations who are tending to shorten class time when moving online. But actually, Deborah was responding to the students' needs to stay connected. They really already had a community in place. They had been meeting, they were just about to get to their culminating event. So they actually wanted that concentrated time to meet together. Deborah also opened up the Zoom video conference early, even before the class, so people could remain connected during that really challenging transition. So they shared writing assignments, they gave feedback, and ultimately this class actually continues to meet and work on their storytelling skills every week. They decided to not do a culminating event right now. And again, all of these decisions were made in conversation with the students because Deborah really had a strong relationship with her students, and the Wallace Annenberg organization supported her adjusting the curriculum however she felt fit for her students. So this is really something though that we're considering a lot right now, which is moving in a program that started in person online is one thing, right? Because you have that connection already built. What is it to create a brand new program with older adults online? How do you gather those student preferences regarding art form and program structure, and how do you best meet the needs of your students? How do you continue to assess your students once the class begins? A big part of older adult learning, which I don't know if everybody got to see the video, one of the videos we sent was specifically older adult learning principles. But a big thing is choice, is that older adults need to feel they have and need to have a choice in the way in which they're engaging with classes. So that idea of responsiveness and assessment is just additionally important when working online. We'll talk more about that later too. So in our next slide, we're going into how we're at Lifetime, thank you, Susan. How we at Lifetime are adjusting our recommendations, our in-person recommendations to the online format. So Lifetime Arts recommends a sequential learning model when designing a creative aging class. And that just means, the class happens over a certain amount of time and skills build over time. It's not a drop-in model. It is a sequential model of 8 to 10 sessions. So we still recommend that model, but we've acknowledged that there need to be some adaptations for remote learning environments. So we've developed some adaptations based on research. And this information I'm about to give you in the next few slides is actually, we've concentrated that into a PDF that Susan will share with you later so that you have this separately from the presentation. So first, in person, we've always recommended that there are 8 or more sessions. For online or other programs, we're still recommending at least 4 synchronous sessions with the possibility of asynchronous elements added to continue the learning outside of class. This is just a suggestion, but this is feeling like, you know, the minimum to, again, do that social engagement, community building that's so necessary. And as I said before, we're also aware that there's some programs that are scheduled in a more condensed camp kind of format where you're meeting maybe every day for a week or 2 weeks. So that's another option. So in our in-person model, we always recommended that sessions were 90 minutes minimum. But as I said before, we're seeing a big trend that in remote formats, 45 minutes, 75 minutes, you know, shorter is better for a lot of different reasons. I think we all understand Zoom fatigue and other things. But however, some cases teaching artists have maintained 90 minutes, and that's again because older adult students have requested that time. Storytelling memoir, you know, if you're really able to share your work in a synchronous class, you might need that additional time. Also, again, some of that hangout time. There's a lot of logging in early, staying in after, so people just have some informal hangout time, which we all need right now to fight social isolation. Wanting to make sure that there's, of course, breaks if you are going for a 90-minute or up session. In person, we've always said that we need a minimum of 10 people in a creative aging class. For remote classes, we're seeing a variety, but we really want to make sure that there's still a manageable teaching artist to student ratio. So online platforms, you know, might be able to support up to 100 people, but that doesn't mean that a class is going to maintain those creative aging goals at that size. So of course, use your best judgment, but we need to be sensitive that as big as these formats can go, might not always serve the older adults that we're trying to serve. And finally, we always recommend and that creative aging programs culminate in an in-person public event where family and friends in the community can see the work that older adults have created. This is a really important aspect of the creative aging movement, both spreading the word of creative aging and the power of it, spreading the word of the incredible work that older adults create, and also fighting ageism within the community. So we're finding, so we still recommend that you find some way to share the work created with the community, whether that's, you know, links to videos, to video projects, online website, you know, galleries are an option. You can invite friends and family to a Zoom video conference. I know a lot of people are doing that. If you're doing a telephone program, people can still call in to the conference line and hear of the work that's being shared. So we're encouraging people to be creative and really include your older adults in formulating this, but we still feel that culminating event, some kind of sharing is still important. So as many of you have probably already found out, when you're moving your programming online, your teaching, your arts teaching online, you're going to have to adjust your art form in a variety of ways. And you need to think very seriously about what choice is going to work best in this format. You're often skilled in several different aspects of a single art form. So, you know, think about how you might adapt your curriculums to the format. For example, a challenge might be you typically taught painting in a studio with all kinds of supplies, and now it's difficult to get supplies to your students. So an adaptation might be, it instead becomes a drawing program. Students use pencil, pen, and paper. You could change the class to collage, and the participants could utilize their own materials. We are finding that people do have some success with getting supplies to students, and we'll talk about some projects that do that a little bit later. Group classes tend to become more individually focused. So we've seen, you know, choirs, there's a lot of older adult choirs. They're still meeting, but the focus is now becoming vocal technique for the individual singer, of course, versus blending as a choir, which is very challenging on Zoom. And if folks have found some other musical solutions, please share them in the chat. But we've seen a lot of really wonderful work being able to work individually with folks. They're still meeting together to have that choir, you know, time together, but they're often actually muted and they can't hear each other, but they might individually do some work with the teaching artist and still, you know, share together as a group. Multidisciplinary forms are also an option. Maybe you're doing a creative movement class, but maybe you change to also add some poetry writing related to the movement, because poetry writing is a little bit easier to adapt to the online format. you could focus in on one or two main skills or learning concepts. So the focus might become in a music class, music theory, rather than, you know, working together with your instruments as a group. We've also heard about a lot of teaching artists, and many of you might be doing this, who've created art projects based on the themes of COVID. What does it feel like to be, you know, cooped up in our home? How are we connecting with family and friends in new ways? So teleconference, we don't want to forget teleconference. That's definitely a format that can be used for remote delivery of creative aging programs. And it may be much more accessible to older adults, not only because of perhaps a lack of access to technology, but also a lack of comfortability with technology, meaning the computer. So phone is definitely an option, and we share some tips here in the slide that a great teaching artist, Robin Beatty, a storytelling artist, has shared with us, and she's been successfully leading creative aging storytelling programs over the phone before COVID and during, as well as some tips from Lorraine Wojtek, and she's the director of the University Without Walls telephone program out of DeRote in New York City, and their programs have doubled since COVID. So tons of older adults are using these programs and are really looking to the phone to be a way to connect with each other and hopefully create some art. So there's lots of ways to explore different art forms during the phone. We've heard, believe it or not, dance programs, visual arts programs can be done over the phone. Of course, you got to think clearly about how this can be done. Often the teaching artist needs to send either snail mail or email written instructions prior to the class with the steps of the skill that they're working on, maybe supplies. A dance teaching artist might need to instruct folks on putting the phone in speaker so they can do moves and not hold on to the phone. But there's definitely Dances for a Variable Population in New York City, holds a bunch of dance phone programs. They mentioned to us that attendance can be really hard to track over the phone. So some systems might give you a printout of all the people that called in. It's really important to, if you can, have an extra assistant, volunteer, or staff person to support you to be able to check that attendance and offer technical support. We're going to be offering a lot of technical support points in this PowerPoint, understanding ideally the teaching artist isn't doing all of those things, but as we all know, we want you to be prepared for whatever situation you might find yourself in. So we're giving you kind of all of the tools and hoping that you can get support, you know, from either staff of the organizations that you're working with, or perhaps some other assistance in some way. So a little bit more about the phone. You'll of course need to adjust your class design. You can't see the whole group, so you'll need to focus on each individual one at a time. You can tailor and design prompts that students can work on independently. You probably can't do activities that everybody does together, like singing together, but focus on the skill you're teaching and what each student will learn. There's a learning curve about listening to each other and making sure that we're sharing the mic. You can't see people and see their natural body language that they want to speak or need to speak. So you might need to really solidify a structure of everybody says their name before they make a comment. You're going to have to strongly facilitate sharing. A lot of these things are the same in a Zoom video conference too, I'm sure you've experienced. You need to sort of actively facilitate maybe a little bit more than you can get away with when you can see a group physically in person. So you can come up with agreements on that and maybe use a timer if that's a practice that you've established at the beginning. Robin said that with her telephone conference program, as I mentioned before, she was able to have a culminating event. Friends and family called in. They were able to hear the stories that were shared, and they really did have a group experience. So she also was able to use breakout rooms in a teleconference program. I've heard some programs have that, some don't. So that might be something that you want to check for with a teleconference program if smaller group learning is important to your art form. All right, a little bit more. We're almost through. Maybe wiggle your fingers or take a breath for a second as we get through the rest of this PowerPoint, and then we'll talk more informally. We're going to move on to program design and the elements that you as a teaching artist want to make sure are present, whether over the phone, online, or through asynchronous activities. So at Lifetime, we like to use the acronym SAFE to denote all the elements of a qualitative creative aging class. And I've noticed some people here might have been through some of our training, so this might be familiar to you. But we're going to go over it again. Also, this follows those older adult learning principles in that video that was sent out beforehand that you can still check out on our website. It's on lifetimearts.org and is called Creative Aging 101. But these, so S.A.F.E Planning are some elements that you probably are going to need to do a little extra planning to make sure that these things are present when working online or in another remote delivery program. So these elements are, as you can see on the slide, skills, assessment, feedback, and engaging socially. So what's that mean? Skills, obvious, one skill builds onto the next skill. So it might be difficult to ensure that skill building is really happening in an online format. So think about what are some ways to make sure that that skill building and the practicing of the art form is happening in your remote program design. Next is assessment, and this is some of what we were speaking about before. Making sure to evaluate your students to tailor the instruction to match their needs. And that's evaluating them session by session and also over time. So a challenge online, as we all know, a teaching artist can't circulate around the room and check in with how people are doing or see the work that folks are creating. So how are you going to make sure that you are assessing your students in online or other remote delivery formats? So feedback is, talking about the work and the artistic process of making the work. This can be hard in an online format. It might be hard for learners to view, hear, or share their work with one another. So you're going to need to think about how can you as the teaching artist facilitate this process of community sharing, followed by the opportunity for feedback. We've heard a lot of different suggestions for this, so we'll talk more about that. And finally, this engaging socially, the social engagement piece. This is intentional social engagement that's tied to the art making to build community between students. So connecting and building relationships through screens or phones, it can be much more difficult than in person. So it's really important that you think about how can you in your class support the development of social engagement of people connecting through the art, even though you might be on a video conference or over the phone. So again, we're going to be offering some suggestions for answers for this, but we're also welcoming your creativity and how you address these things that are really principles of good creative aging course design. So here's an example, which is John Leonim, is a Brooklyn Arts Council teaching artist, and he was 1 month into teaching clown and comedy skills to older adults on the Jewish Community Council of Greater Coney Island in Brooklyn when the senior center closed due to COVID. So he focused on how to adjust his curriculum to adapt to Zoom conference. During their sessions, he had the students do physical warm-ups and they followed each other's movement via the web cameras. So in this way, John could assess how each of his students was doing that day and who might need some special attention or help during the session. He was also very upfront with his students the whole time that, this was a big experiment, and he was constantly collecting feedback during the course of each of the sessions. What was working, what wasn't working, could they see and hear him adequately? Could they see and hear each other adequately? And this was also, was really a direct assessment of how they were doing. He did one assignment during a class, which was for each person to pick an object in their house to personify: slippers, a pack of playing cards, the couch, and then they puppeted that object and then ranted about their new life during quarantine and their challenges. So this was an exercise that not only builds skills in clown and comedy, but also, allowed the participants to share what life is like right now for them, cooped up at home during COVID. So this was both a social engagement opportunity, but it also was an assessment of their comedy skills and their social emotional connections. So asynchronous opportunities online offer, some real opportunities for things that might extend or support the learning that you're doing in synchronous classes. These elements might allow your learners to engage more deeply on their own with the art form that they're studying. And also engaging with asynchronous elements outside of class might free up class time for more of that discussion, that feedback, and that social engagement time. So some ideas are, instructional videos that you as the teaching artist might make, viewing other artists' work or bios online, watching films, listening to music scores. And these resources can also connect students directly to your organization. Say if you're working with a museum, these resources might be a good way to connect back. So everything I've mentioned are really great to extend learning, but again, they aren't necessarily going to promote that social engagement. So we've been trying to think of asynchronous options in creative aging classes as time outside of the full group meeting, where you can still plan opportunities for your students to connect with one another, again, around the art form. So you can talk to your students about ways to do this. Some examples that teaching artists are doing is they partner students and have them meet just over the telephone, call each other over the telephone between classes to discuss maybe a specific resource or share their work. If it's, you know, written work like poetry, maybe you give them assignment to talk about their process, give feedback, support to one another. So that's just another way to create those social engagement connections that doesn't necessarily require the whole group meeting. You as the teaching artist might start a discussion group or a chat board so people can be sort of connecting informally during the week between synchronous classes. And we've heard a lot of teaching artists talk about office hours. Depending on your, you know, capacity, and we never want, you know, teaching artists to do more than they're being paid for or they have time for, but having that one-on-one time outside of these synchronous meetings goes a long way to connect with the students, also offering them some time to discuss if they're having technical issues or things that they're not able to talk about in the group setting, and also just, you know, speak more directly about, you know, their artistic process. So even if you are doing all asynchronous classes, you can definitely still, you know, keep those goals of social engagement and skill building as priorities. A great example of this is the Minnesota Conservatory for the Arts. They developed a project called Art in a Box, and participants created artwork each week on postcards that they then sent to each other with messages about their process. So the way this worked is before the program began, the instructor sent each student a curriculum packet that had an instruction booklet that highlighted a different topic for each week, such as line, shape, color, tracing. And this packet also included all the art materials that they needed for the project, like postcards, the pens, and the stamps. And social engagement was really boosted through the sharing of the postcards with each other, where they gave feedback on each other's work and talked about their process. There was also staff follow-up through weekly emails, and they created a Google folder for the participants to see everybody's postcards that were created. So the program ended up having really high engagement, and Minnesota Conservatory for the Arts is actually planning a part 2 for this project. So this was a standalone project, but some aspects of this art-driven social engagement could be incorporated into a program that's also meeting synchronously. So you might be able to match both different elements in a program. All right, we're almost there. So maybe shake your shoulders up and down a little bit, shake your hands out. Now we're gonna move on to some logistical tips. So this is more prep planning and delivery. You know, I think we're all realizing that moving programs online requires a little more prep even than all of the prep we already did for our classes. And as we stated before, you know, starting a new program online is going to have different challenges than moving a program that existed already in person online. The high touch engagement with students and partner organizations really can't be underscored enough. As we said, ideally as the teaching artist, you're gonna have support with these prep items, but we just really wanted you all to be, you know, prepared and think about what all might be required depending on, you know, the support that you can get. So this is probably on everybody's mind, is that comes up around all kinds of online learning, is the digital divide. So according to the Pew Research Center, only 67% of older adults 65 and up use the internet. I think that study was in 2013, but I think those numbers remain about the same. And that's a really huge improvement on the past. But this demographic, you know that this demographic skews to the younger, more affluent end of the spectrum. That study also revealed that older adults often feel intimidated by technology, and that they really benefit from help from others when trying to get online and access online learning. So adding in a window of pre-programmed tech support, if possible, is really important to address digital barriers. So here's some ideas that people are doing to address these tech issues and that you might want to think about, or an organization that you work with might want to think about. We've seen folks host one-on-one tech office hours very successfully. These are times where older adults can call in to get assistance with designated staff, sort of chunk of time that is set aside for that. This would be great to be done before the class begins, and it could continue as an offering throughout the class course. People have done sort of a shortened version of that, like a tech meet and greet. So this would be a meeting, a workshop before the class even begins. That's just about getting everybody on Zoom or whatever format you're using, showing everybody the tools, answering questions, stuff like that. And to separate that time from the class, you're always going to need to deal with tech issues in the classes. I'm sure you all know this, but it's nice to be able to have a designated time that's separate from, you know, the art making, ideally. It might be possible to ask your students for contact information of family and friend support that live near them or with them, and if they're comfortable giving that information, so that they have another partner to support them with getting online. And in terms of partnership, we're finding that peer-to-peer tech support is really a great thing to encourage. Many classes, it's been very helpful. Older adults run the gamut of their literacy, their technology literacy. And we've heard lots of stories of class participants really being the best technical support for each other. So connecting students through a shared contact list, if you have permission, could really enable that peer-to-peer learning and support. You can always include how-to videos and typed instructions in your communications with students. And a really great resource we want to share is this National Senior Planet Tech Hotline. And you can also find more about Senior Planet, just seniorplanet.org. They are offering this tech hotline for anybody 60 and up to get an answer to any tech question. I think they're at normal business hours, Eastern Standard Time, but people can leave a message, and a volunteer or a trainer will get back to them with answers. So during class, definitely it's important to be checking in often with students, see how they're hearing and seeing, make a plan for them to what's the way that they should signal to you that they have issues, maybe through the chat or cell phone. Again, ideally the teaching artist isn't managing these tech aspects. Ideally you have at least one other additional support that can really be in charge of supporting the tech aspects. It'd be great, if possible, if all the students get that person's cell phone number and has that person's contact info should something come up. So here's a great example of tech support for moving creative aging programs online. This is Stagebridge Senior Theater's Performing Arts Institute in Oakland, California. And they moved all their programming online during COVID. They created a staffed digital customer service line that students could call during normal business hours to get answers to tech questions related to all these new Zoom classes they were offering. And they used Google Voice, so the staff could respond to these messages from their offices that were now at home. And they also hosted those digital coaching open hours that we mentioned before, so people could call in and they received one-on-one coaching with the Zoom program tools completely outside of class time. They created a guide for using Zoom, as well as a frequently asked questions list, and those were available on their website along with all of their online classes, and people could register, and they updated their enrollment policies to reflect this new format. And Julius Rea is their marketing and communications manager, and he really just calls this their digital shift. And he really stressed the importance of their responsiveness to students. Students felt really comfortable to call up and say, this isn't working for me, how can we do this better? And in this way, they were really having the students be the catalysts for reframing the classes in this context. So we really recommend that if you're doing synchronous classes, that you establish and communicate, really consistent routines, so everybody is on the same page. You might invite participants to log on 20 minutes early, as we said before. This is time to address any technical issues, and also just time to hang out and chat and check in. That doesn't have to take up your precious class time, which is often shortened in these formats. Definitely establish what your protocols are. Do you want people to be muted unless they're speaking? Do you want all the web cameras on? Do you want them all off? How do you want to handle questions that come up? Raise hands or chat functions if you're using Zoom. Do you just want people to raise their hands? Do you want everyone to be unmuted and just be able to speak freely, and you'll facilitate that? If you're on Zoom, do you want it to be speaker view, so you only focus in on the person speaking? Do you want it gallery, so that everybody can see each other and maybe have that sort of feeling of social engagement? So it's really up to you how you decide to run your classes, but we find it's really important to determine what these kind of rules or agreements are and really communicate those often with your students. We recommend you, all those rules and etiquette, that you communicate those with the students prior to the first class. You might even put them up like on a screen share, because written out might be another way for folks to really see those. They're also probably going to need reminders through class on how to use Zoom, how to mute. So, be patient as possible. There's a lot of talk about accessibility on Zoom, especially for older adults. We just want to make sure that the visual and audio clarity is top notch. You want to make sure there's good lighting in your space. Use a microphone or headset, if possible. Check in often. Are people seeing and hearing you? There's often that sound delay, so you might want to alert people to that, so that we're not talking over each other. People might need to take another beat before speaking. If you're using slides, you've got to make sure that you have those universal design elements, high contrast fonts, large type. Make sure the images are bright and clear. Always make sure they're captioned. Definitely use closed captioning when possible, like especially on YouTube. There's that easy option to turn on the closed captioning. And of course, it's easy to feel stiff early on camera. We really encourage folks to be transparent, be yourself, especially with older adults. You can really be yourself and say this is an experiment, we're all jumping in, and that it's new for everybody. So we all know that Zoom fatigue is a really real thing, and I think for older adults it can especially be an issue. So we wanted to share with you a little tidbit that a storytelling teaching artist shared with us, that he has his students do something called 20-20-20. So every 20 minutes in his class, he has students take a break, find something beautiful to look at that's 20 feet away, ideally, through a window, and focus on that for 20 seconds. So he does this for all of his classes, that little 20 minutes, a little break, look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds. That gives everybody's eyes a break from the screen. We also recommend other just exercises to break up that screen staring, exercises like wiggling your fingers, taking a deep breath, just centering people back in their bodies, because it's really easy to forget that when you're sitting in front of the computer for any length of time. So last little bit is just how to support students before and during the implementation of synchronous classes. We really recommend that you provide as much information as possible. Folks are embarking in some new ways, when they're working online. They might be trying a new art form. They might not know you. They're also might be new to using technology in this way. So as much as possible, preparation really goes a long way to build everybody's confidence. So provide a written course overview that details the structure of the class. Email a simplified curriculum. Doesn't have to be the syllabus, but just the topic areas for each week. Definitely share the class agenda before the class. It can be simple, but just so they see the basic structure. You can send resource links ahead of time, things for them to look at, to view before the class, and any supplies that they might need for the first class. These are things that they need to find at home, or materials you're going to be shipping to them. Definitely there's people have had success with shipping materials to older adults. Again, it requires the sort of a additional time frame to make sure that happens in the right time. And also support, between classes. So include any assignments after a class that you want them to work on, any of those supplementary materials. Always include the agenda for the next class. And you send a link to a brief survey if you can, maybe just 1 or 2 questions, what worked or didn't work. I want to say a little bit more on surveying. We found that this can be really important. Let's go to the next slide there, Susan. Post-class surveying of students would naturally occur in an in-person setting. Often at the end of the class, students are packing up and they might be able to pull you aside and, ask for something that they need, or you might be able to, check in with somebody that might make a complaint that, something about the class that's not working for them. It's really hard to get that time, of virtually impossible in an online setting. So it's why we feel like you may need to be a little bit more active about your surveying. So you might just send an email after. What worked about, how was your tech today? Some of these questions, what worked, what didn't work? You could do like a Survey Monkey, which is pretty simple, or you could just write an email, have folks answer these questions. Maybe you drop it into the chat before the end of a session and say, write me if there's some issue. Just important stuff. Thanks, Susan. And just wrapping up, we just feel like we were actually speaking about this before this session, that in a way, we're all having to be extremely creative right now. We're jumping into new landscapes and we're all learning together. We wanted to share this quote from, again, Julius Rea from Stagebridge, that he said of their online pivot that, it really was just a culture shift. Our whole focus in education is we're always trying one more step to be better. And moving to digital, this is simply our next step. So in that way, we feel like we can take risks, we can experiment, we can be transparent with our students that we're learning together, and just keep trying to improve with time and experience, just in the same way that we're improving our art forms. So thanks so much. That's the end of this massive presentation. So we're going to go into breakout rooms and just to have some time to talk with each other about, and it's going to be pretty short. Looks like it's going to be 7 minutes. We're going to have some time to talk with each other about where you're at in terms of adapting your work, whether that be, ideally if you're working with older adults, but across any age spectrum, how you're adapting your work for a remote delivery format. So when you get in your group, you're all teaching artists, so you know how this works. Introduce yourself and just say where you're located in space and time, and what art form you work in. And if you wouldn't mind designating a spokesperson, so this is just somebody that when we come back to the main group, we'll just share like 1 to 2 takeaways from your conversation, that would be great. So here are some prompts to think about. Don't feel like you have to answer both or all of this. If there's just something that is really pinging for your group, definitely focus in on that. So the first question is just how might you, or how are you already adjusting the art forms that you teach to work better for older adults in a remote delivery format? So this might be some of the things we were talking about, focusing in on theory, focusing on the individual skills, simplifying your supplies, etc. And the other idea that's funny, they're both number 1, because obviously these are very important questions. I just saw the slide. But obviously the really other important idea, how can you incorporate this social engagement piece tied to the art making in a remote delivery program? What are the challenges with that? What are some of your ideas? A follow-up might be if you're considering just doing asynchronous only, what are some ideas about incorporating social engagement into that too? So here are your questions. Susan is going to take you into your breakout rooms. And so let's see, Annie, it's just 7 minutes you think we've got?
Yeah, I think about 7 minutes.
Okay.
And then we'll come back to wrap up. And just a heads up that everyone may not have time to share out. So we'll just call on a couple of people before we close.
Great. So you're going to get, I think, an invitation from Susan to join a breakout room, and you'll hop on into that conversation. Thank you.
So anyone still remaining in the main room, if you need any assistance, let me know. Perhaps you just stepped away from your computer.
I don't know if I'm in the main room, or is this my chat room? This room?
Is this, how do you say your name? Akua?
Yeah, Akua.
Yeah, you're still in the main room. Do you have an invite on your screen that you can accept?
Nope.
So you don't see any, because it's saying you've not joined. Let me try.
And I'm here with a bunch of people. So Ed Freeman, Melissa Berman, Julie Jackson, Katie Hebner, C. Thomas.
These are all people still in the main room.
With me. That's why I thought maybe this was yet
I think these are people that just didn't accept the invite into the room. So I might have to move some people. I'm just noticing there's some people with 1 in 1 room. Let me move some people. So let me try moving you and see if that, maybe the message will pop up on your screen.
All right.
Okay. Okay, I just moved you again. See if that did anything.
Now, would changing my gallery view do anything to make something more visible?
You can try that, or minimize the webcams. Maybe it's behind, you know, behind the webcam, so you're not seeing it.
So I'm in grid view. So got it.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
So Ed, Julie, Jackson, Katie, Melissa, or Portia, if you want to go. It looks like Portia stepped away. If you are in the main room now, you can hear me, and you want to go into a breakout room, just let me know. Maybe you've just stepped away from your computer.
And Susan, there's nobody that's in their own, that's solo in a breakout room now, right?
Well, Annie is just with one person.
Okay.
Laura. Do you want to go into any, Julie?
No, I'm good.
Okay. You've done your work.
A lot of talking.
That's good. Shall I switch to share out now?
Sure. Great.
Oh, somebody's calling. Let me see. And Julie?
Yep.
It's 3:23. Let me know when you want me to close it. You want.
Oh, you didn't put a timer on it?
You know what? Because I was dealing with getting people in other rooms. I didn't know the time.
Okay, let's give them a 1-minute warning now and take them back in 1 minute.
All right, when I close it, it gives them 60 seconds to come back. Should I just close it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I didn't realize how many people weren't gonna pop into the rooms, and that I didn't want to leave somebody by themselves. I got distracted. Welcome back.
Welcome back. Hop back into this big room magically.
Yeah, it looks like they're wrapping up their discussion because a lot of people are still in the rooms. It'll close in 20 seconds.
Pretty short.
Yeah.
Some of us were just pulled out.
I know. It's such a strange feeling, right? Sucked back through the vortex. Welcome back, everybody.
And it's closed.
Okay, great. Welcome back, everybody. Pop, you're here. Hi, that's great. I can see everyone. Great, so we have, a very little time. And I know that that was probably very truncated. I'm hoping that the conversation can continue on Facebook. I know Jamie's going to talk about the shared group with you all in just a bit. But first, I just wanted to know if anybody would like to, spokesperson from your group would like to share out. I think I can see most of you if you want to give a little wave and your screen to share out some takeaways.
Amber wants to.
Amber, Amber's being nominated.
That's me.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. So I was in a group with a few people that we've had a wide range of experiences, but it does seem like what we've been able to do is really meet the moment and make some adjustments and incorporate more online resources. So finding one of the participants in our group found some online resources for sound effects. So he didn't have to provide props. Instead, there were online resources, which I thought was really interesting. And yet we're also considering how we can move forward with some of the things that you guys have shared. I think the mail art packages is something that I'm going to be thinking pretty hard about.
Great, great. So glad.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Amber. Anybody else want to wave a hand, share out? Yes, Alexandra.
Hi, so I was in a small breakout group with 2 other people, and all 3 of us do movement or dance. And so it seems that the common theme was we had to jump right into online, and it's for dance and movement, it's challenging. The technical aspect for one, not knowing how many people would participate, having consistency. And so it sounds like we're all at the experimentation stage right now.
Sure, great. I'm glad that that worked out. You had a little bit of a community there. Maybe you all can continue this conversation.
I hope so. And I didn't actually get a chance to share, so I just wanted to mention that for my program, which I had done, I work with 2 partners who are musicians. And so we pivoted from a focus on dancing to music. Cool. and lyrics. So, and you had mentioned earlier, Julie, switching from dance to poetry. That's exactly what we did. And that seemed to work well.
That's great.
And we also, to make it more interactive, this is through Arts for the Aging, we interspersed simple movement exercises rather than an actual tango dance class, which is what the original in-person program included, with singing and music and even a sing-along.
Great. Just trying everything, seeing what works. Yep.
And also even keep the pace, and to move it along. And it seemed very well received. We've done it for 2 different groups online so far.
Great. Thank you, Alexandra. I just want to make sure that Ray raised his hand physically. And so Ray, hi.
Hi, finally. I put out my video. Oh my goodness.
Great. Welcome. Any takeaways?
Yes, actually, I just want to share that I work with a classic music nonprofit based in New York City, and we also adapted our programming community outreach online. And so during the COVID pivot, and we are partnering with DeRote by actually offering music and one-on-one interaction with their participants. So in our case, we have different various forms from one-to-one small group and one-on-one, but we definitely see the digital divide. But in our case, we are able to rely on our partner organization, for example, DeRote, to help facilitate the tech support component. But there's also what DeRote do is for the Zoom concert, they actually have a hangout session before the concert starts. So that really helped facilitate the social engagement. So in our case, we are really relying on our partner organization to facilitate the social component because they know their audience better. But in this case as well, I think with our artists, we also trying to have one-on-one interaction with participants by asking them what their music preference is, and then that helps shape their programming a little bit. So
this is great. So sorry, Ray, we're just running out of time. I think what you're speaking about in terms of really working with partners, that they can really offer, especially that responsiveness. They know their constituents maybe better than you. Really working in that partnership is extremely important. Good. I'm sorry that we had so little time. I want to make sure that we're passing it on back to Jamie for a final survey. Also, I'm going to have Susan put that document straight into the chat so that you have this resource that we've been sharing. And also just lifetimearts.org is another great resource as we continue you know, this thinking and these conversations about how to do this pivot.
Great. Well, thank you so much for a very informative presentation, and appreciate the time to hear from folks about the work that they're doing and have those small group discussions. So thank you. I just wanted to say before we leave today, if you could take a few seconds, a few moments to fill out a quick poll that our producer is going to post now for us. This is just about how the workshop resonated with you. So if you could complete that, that would be wonderful and very much appreciated. Just wanted to let you all know too that recordings of this workshop, as well as others, are all going to be available on NASA's YouTube page. And so if you check out our Facebook group, if you have not been on there yet, you should sign up, because there's reflections from sessions as well as links to that YouTube page that I just mentioned, and also a continuation of discussions. If there isn't enough time to talk through all of the great ideas and sharing, those discussions can continue on that Facebook group. So just a couple minutes ago, I actually posted the Facebook group link in the chat for you all. So check that out and register if you haven't already. And finally, just wanted to remind you that every Friday we're doing a brief survey on the retreat. Kind of just what do you think? How's it going? Things you might want to see change or other topics in the future. So please look for that email in your inbox sometime on Friday. And finally, just wanted to say thank you again from all of us in the Mid-Atlantic region. And that is obviously Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, as well as Maryland and Delaware and Virginia and West Virginia and New York and New Jersey, with special thanks to the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies for all their support in this work, as well as the National Endowment for the Arts and their support. So thank you so much again for participating. We are so grateful, and we hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you so much, and hope to see you at some future sessions.
Bye, thank you.